Dale Evans, the brilliant Queen of the West, and her husband Roy Rogers were the wholesome heart of Hollywood. They sang their way into millions of homes with a promise of happy trails. But for Dale, those trails were often incredibly difficult. In her later years, she opened up about a life marked by devastating loss and the stunning secret of what it took for her and her husband to keep smiling. This isn't the story you think it is. This is the tragic truth Dale Evans carried with her to the grave. To understand the weight of the burdens Dale Evans carried, you have to first understand the myth. In the middle of the 20th century, no couple represented the picture-perfect American dream quite like Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. He was the king of the cowboys, the straight-shooting hero with a heart of gold and his famous horse Trigger. She was his perfect match, the Queen of the West. Beautiful, full of life, and just as comfortable on a horse as she was singing a song. Together they weren't just a couple, they were a brand, a symbol of family values and good, clean fun. Their on-screen chemistry was electric, a wholesome romance that audiences adored in over 24 films and the beloved TV hit, The Roy Rogers Show. They didn't just play their parts, they lived them. They co-wrote and sang their signature tune, Happy Trails, which became a national farewell, a promise of a brighter tomorrow. For millions of families huddled around their radios and, later, their new televisions, Roy and Dale were more than entertainers. They were role models. They seemed to have it all: fame, fortune, and a love that was as pure as a western stream. They projected an image of effortless perfection, right down to their famous fringed shirts and ornate boots. They were everywhere: rodeos, parades, public events, always smiling, always gracious. They built an empire of merchandise, comic books, and even a museum. This was the carefully crafted image, the golden myth of Roy and Dale, a world where every sunset led to a happy ending. But behind the curtain, the real lives of the king and queen were anything but simple. And the first crack in that perfect facade was a secret Dale had been carrying since she was just a teenager. Long before she was Dale Evans, Queen of the West, she was Frances Octavia Smith from Uvalde, Texas. Her childhood was a whirlwind of moving from town to town, and she had an energy that couldn't be contained by a quiet life. She was talented, ambitious, and had a voice that she knew was her ticket out. But her journey to stardom took a sharp detour because of a choice she made as a young girl. At just 14 years old, Frances eloped with a young man named Thomas Frederick Fox. It was a decision she almost immediately regretted. The marriage was a mess and didn't last long. By 15, she was a mother to a son, Thomas Jr., and soon after, a single mom. Her husband, feeling too young to be tied down, simply left. In an era where being a single mother was deeply shameful, Frances found herself in Memphis, Tennessee, barely a woman herself, and completely alone with a child to raise. This was her first secret. The shame was immense, but her ambition never died. She took secretarial jobs to get by, but she never, ever stopped singing. Her talent was too big to ignore, and she started getting work on local radio. It was a station manager who suggested a new name, one that sounded clean and professional, with no hint of a complicated past: Dale Evans. As she started to get noticed by Hollywood, the pressure from studios to maintain a perfect image was intense. In the 1940s, a divorced single mother just wasn't the kind of leading lady they wanted to sell to the public. So a painful lie was created. To protect her career, her managers and the studio decided that her son Tom would be introduced to the world not as her child, but as her younger brother. For years, Dale lived this lie. In private, she was a loving mother, but in public, she had to pretend her own son was her sibling. The guilt was a constant, gnawing feeling. It was a sacrifice she made for her dream, but it came at a huge personal cost. She would marry and divorce 2 more times before she ever met Roy Rogers, making her life even more complicated than the simple one she had to project. The smiling, carefree cowgirl the world fell in love with was, from the very beginning, a woman haunted by a secret she felt she had to keep. While Dale was navigating Hollywood with her secrets, another Western star was dealing with his own terrible tragedy. Roy Rogers, born Leonard Sly, was already the king of the cowboys, but his world had just been shattered. In 1936, he'd married Arlene Wilkins, a woman he met after she called a radio station promising to bake him a pie. They had a happy marriage, adopting a daughter, Cheryl, and later having 2 children of their own, Linda Lou and Roy Jr., nicknamed Dusty. But in 1946, that happiness was cut short. Just days after their son Dusty was born, Arlene died suddenly from an embolism. Roy was left a widower and a single father to 3 young children. The cheerful, yodeling cowboy on the screen was now a man drowning in grief. It was during this time of shared sorrow that Roy and Dale's lives truly came together. They'd first been cast together in 1944 in The Cowboy and the Señorita, and their professional chemistry was undeniable. Republic Pictures knew they had magic and put them in film after film together. But off-screen, something deeper was growing, built on a shared understanding of loss. Dale saw the grieving father behind the hero, and Roy saw a strength in Dale that came from her own private battles. In 1947, while at a rodeo in Chicago, Roy proposed to Dale as they sat on their horses, waiting for their cue, a moment straight out of one of their movies. They were married on New Year's Eve that same year. To the public, it was the perfect Hollywood ending. For Roy and Dale, it was a second chance. They were 2 people who had known incredible pain and were now ready to build a new life. One of the first things Dale did as Roy's wife was to finally end the lie about her son. With Roy's full support, she proudly and publicly told the world that Tom was her son, not her brother. The relief was immense, like a heavy weight was finally lifted. They blended their families, Roy's 3 kids and Dale's son Tom, into a new, sprawling, and hopeful family. It seemed like the happy trails they sang about were finally real. They had found a partner who understood their scars, and they looked forward to a future they hoped would be free from the pain that had defined their lives so far. But their hard-won happiness wouldn't last. With their marriage, Roy and Dale started creating the big family they'd always wanted. They bought a ranch in California, a place where their blended family of 4, Cheryl, Linda Lou, Dusty, and Tom, could grow up away from the Hollywood spotlight. It was a home filled with love, faith, and music. To the public, they were the perfect American family, a real-life version of the values they promoted on screen. They wanted a large family. Even when Hollywood managers warned them, it would hurt their romantic image. But for Roy and Dale, family wasn't a problem for their career. It was the entire point of their lives. In 1950, their joy grew even more. Dale gave birth to their only biological child together, a daughter they named Robin Elizabeth Rogers. Robin's birth was a moment of pure happiness, the child who cemented their 2 families into one. Their home was noisy, chaotic, and filled with laughter. It really seemed like they had finally left the shadows of their past behind them. They kept working, starring in their popular TV show and making public appearances. But their real focus was always on their home and their children. They were a deeply religious couple, and their faith was the foundation of their family life. The Happy Trails family wasn't just a brand. It was a reality they cherished, a sanctuary they had built together. This was the peak of their personal happiness. Dale, finally free from the secret about her first son, loved being the matriarch of their big, bustling family. Roy, having found love again, was a devoted husband and father. They were a beacon of hope and stability in an industry famous for scandals. But a dark cloud was gathering, one that would bring a kind of heartbreak so deep it would test their faith, their marriage, and their will to go on. The Happy Trails were about to lead into a valley of unimaginable sorrow. The joy Robin brought to the family was quickly met with a devastating reality. Shortly after she was born on August 26, 1950, Doctors gave Roy and Dale heartbreaking news. Their daughter was born with Down syndrome, a condition that was cruelly misunderstood at the time. On top of that, she had a serious heart defect. In the 1950s, the advice for parents of children with disabilities was often cold and brutal. Doctors told Roy and Dale to put Robin in an institution, to hide her away for the sake of their other children and their careers. They were told she would be a burden and that her presence would bring shame to their family. The studio agreed, terrified that a child with a disability would ruin their wholesome image. Roy and Dale were horrified. They looked at their daughter and saw a blessing, not a burden. In a brave act of defiance, they rejected all that advice. They promised Robin and God that they would take her home, love her, and make her the center of their family. They refused to be ashamed. In fact, they did the opposite, insisting that Robin be included in family photos, a radical move that sent a powerful message. For nearly 2 years, Robin was the heart of the Rogers home. Her siblings loved her, and she was showered with affection. Dale later said Robin was their angel unaware, who taught them the true meaning of unconditional love. But their time with her was tragically short. Just before her 2nd birthday, Robin got the mumps. For any other child, it would have been a routine illness. For Robin, with her fragile immune system and weak heart, it was a death sentence. On August 24, 1952, Robin Elizabeth Rogers passed away. The grief that hit the family was suffocating. Dale was completely shattered. In the depths of her sorrow, she turned to her faith and began to write. She wrote a small book from Robin's perspective, looking down from heaven. She called it Angel Unaware. Publishers initially rejected it, thinking the subject was too painful. But Dale kept trying. When it was finally published in 1953, Angel Unaware became a massive bestseller. All royalties were donated to a charity for children with developmental disabilities. The book was a phenomenon. It broke through the silence and shame surrounding disabilities. Letters poured in from families who had also been told to hide their children, thanking Dale for her courage. After the book came out, something amazing happened. At Roy and Dale's public appearances, among the cheering kids, they began to see other children with disabilities brought out into the open by parents who were no longer ashamed. Through their deepest tragedy, Roy and Dale had sparked a national conversation. They had turned their pain into purpose, but fate wasn't finished with them yet. Losing Robin had tested their faith, but also strengthened their resolve to help children in need. They felt Robin's short life had a purpose, to open their hearts to even more love. In the years that followed, they expanded their family through adoption, welcoming Mary Doty, a baby of Choctaw heritage, John David, or Sandy, a boy who had been a victim of abuse, and Debbie Lee, an orphan from the Korean War. With a foster child named Marion, their family was now a diverse and loving group of 9 children. They poured their energy into their kids and their faith, finding a new normal after their grief. But the happy trails they sang about seemed to be permanently shadowed by loss. In August 1964, tragedy struck again. Their adopted daughter, Debbie, just 12 years old, was on a church bus trip when it was involved in a horrific accident. Debbie was killed instantly. The news was a devastating blow, ripping open the old wounds from losing Robin. To lose one child is unbearable. To lose a second felt like a cruel punishment. The family was plunged back into mourning. Dale again turned to writing to process her grief, writing another book in tribute to Debbie. But the family was barely given a moment to breathe before the next wave of heartbreak hit. Just over a year later, in 1965, the unthinkable happened again. Their adopted son, Sandy, who had survived a childhood of neglect to become a bright young man, had joined the army. One night, in a tragic and senseless accident in Germany, the 18-year-old soldier choked to death. 3 children, gone. Each loss was a unique trauma, another tear in the fabric of their family. The public watched in sorrow. How could one family endure so much? Their story was no longer a Hollywood fairy tale. It was a saga of faith and suffering. Roy and Dale clung to each other and to their beliefs, but the weight of these tragedies was almost unimaginable. They still had to get on stage, smile for the cameras, and sing happy trails. But behind those smiles, their hearts were in a million pieces. For decades, the world saw Dale Evans as the smiling queen of the West, a pillar of faith who handled tragedy with grace. But underneath, she was haunted. In her final years, she began to reveal the true depth of her pain, and it became clear what the secret she carried truly was. It wasn't a dark, shocking act her husband had committed. The husband's secret was actually their shared secret, the immense, private burden of their unending grief. The real secret was how a couple could bury 3 children and still find the strength to get on stage and sing about happy trails. It was the secret of the profound strain this river of sorrow put on their marriage and their souls. Dale spoke about the pressure to keep up their perfect public image. They were Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. They weren't allowed to fall apart. So they smiled, waved, and went to work, all while carrying a private grief that was almost suffocating. This double life was a performance that lasted for decades. Adding to this was the personal secret that had tormented Dale since she was a teen, the lie about her son, Tom. Even though she'd publicly acknowledged him after marrying Roy, the years of pretending he was her brother left deep scars of guilt. This early pain, combined with the later tragedies, created a complex web of sorrow she carried every single day. In her later, more candid years, Dale also hinted at the normal, human struggles within their perfect marriage. She talked about the loneliness she felt when Roy's work kept him away. She mentioned his strict parenting, which contrasted with his gentle cowboy image. These weren't scandals meant to hurt her husband, whom she loved fiercely. They were honest admissions of the reality behind the myth. Their marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was a real partnership, with all the challenges that come with it, made 1,000 times harder by fame and unimaginable loss. So, the shocking truth Dale revealed wasn't about betrayal. It was about endurance. The secret was the pain itself. The truth that behind the wholesome facade was a woman who had been a teenage single mother, who was forced to hide her own child, and who had buried 3 more. That was the haunting truth she carried. The final chapter of Dale Evans' life reflected the decades of hardship she'd lived through. The emotional pain had taken a physical toll. She suffered a major heart attack in 1992, followed by a stroke in 1996 that left her increasingly frail. The deepest blow came in 1998, when her partner of over 50 years, her king, Roy Rogers, died of congestive heart failure. Theirs was one of Hollywood's greatest love stories, a partnership built in the spotlight and in the darkest of shadows. When he died, Dale lost her anchor. "To say I will miss him is a gross understatement," she said. The happy trail had ended for her cowboy, and she was left to walk the last stretch alone. For the 3 years she lived after Roy's death, Dale was a figure of quiet reflection. Her public appearances became rare. The vibrant cowgirl was gone, replaced by an elderly woman who carried the map of her life's sorrows on her face. On February 7, 2001, at the age of 88, Dale Evans's own heart finally gave out. She died of congestive heart failure, the same thing that had taken her husband. It was as if her heart, having carried so much grief for so long, simply couldn't beat anymore. Her death was the final, quiet end to a life of incredible suffering, and even more incredible resilience. She was laid to rest beside Roy, the cowboy who shared her most painful secret. For Dale, death may have been a release, a final, peaceful reunion with her husband and the 3 children she had lost along life's hard and dusty trail. If you were moved by the incredible true story of Dale Evans, please subscribe for more stories about the hidden lives of Hollywood legends. And don't forget to like and share this video to help keep her remarkable legacy alive. Dale Evans and Roy Rogers leave behind a legacy far more complex than their theme song. On the surface, they are symbols of a simpler time, of wholesome family entertainment, and the myth of the American West. But their true legacy lies in the story that was hidden behind the screen. It's a story of unbelievable human strength in the face of relentless tragedy. Dale Evans wasn't just a queen in a rhinestone costume. She was a mother who held her family together through the loss of 3 children. She was a pioneer who, through her own grief, changed the national conversation about children with disabilities, bringing a difficult subject into the light. The shocking secret of their lives wasn't a scandal, but a testament to their endurance. It was the secret of their shared pain and their unwavering commitment to each other and their faith, even when that faith was tested beyond all limits. Their story is a powerful reminder that even the brightest smiles can hide the deepest sorrows. Dale Evans's journey was not an easy ride down a happy trail. It was a path marked by immense pain and loss. Yet through it all, she never stopped believing and never stopped loving. Her life is a powerful, painful, and ultimately inspiring story of a woman who was dealt an unimaginable hand, but played it with courage and grace. That is the true, haunting, and beautiful legacy of the Queen of the West.